The conditional tense is a tense that's used to talk about things that would happen. However, we have to be careful because in English, we'll use would to talk about things that we used to do, ongoing past actions. For instance, we might say, we would go to the beach every summer, or we would do this when I was little. That's kind of a colloquialism in English, and we would use the imperfect tense to say those things in Spanish, not the conditional tense. So the conditional tense, things that would happen, but we're talking about hypothetical things, not ongoing past actions. An example in English of a sentence that would require the conditional tense is, I think they would do a good job. The they would do a good job is conditional tense. The conditional tense is very easy to learn because it's very similar to a couple of other tenses that you've already learned. Notice that we have the exact same steps as the future tense. Select a verb and add the correct ending. Notice that just like the future tense, we do not cut off the ending. And we only have one set of endings for the conditional tense. And if you look at these, they're actually identical to the endings for the imperfect tense. Ia, ias, ia, iamos, iais, ian, with an accent mark on the I. That's the same as the endings for ER and IR verbs in the imperfect tense. But again, the difference between the conditional and the imperfect is that we don't cut off the AR, ER, or IR before we add these endings. Here's a sample sentence. I would go to the park. The verb is to go, so we have ir. The subject is I or yo, so we'll use the yo ending, ia. And we just add it on to the end. Therefore we have yo iría al parque. If we were saying they would go to the park, ellos irían al parque, and so forth. In the conditional tense, we do have some irregular verbs. There are 3 types of irregulars, and these should look very familiar to you if you've seen the future tense. We have drop the E, irregulars, vowel to D, and change the spelling. The good news about these irregulars is that they're exactly identical in form to what we saw in the future tense. Of course, we're going to use our conditional endings, but if a verb is irregular in the future, it's going to be the same type of irregular verb in the conditional, and the steps are exactly the same. So here we see our same examples of drop the E verbs in the conditional tense as we saw in the future tense. Again, instead of sabería, we would have sabría, 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 and so forth. The same, of course, would go for any of these others or other verbs that maybe drop the E in the conditional tense. Likewise, with vowel to D, we're going to look again at the same examples. Poner, salir, tener, venir. Each of these, we would remove the vowel before the R and then add our endings. So for poner, we would have pondría, pondrías, pondría, pondríamos, pondríais. And it doesn't quite fit pondrían. The same concept would go for any of these others or any other vowel to D verbs in the conditional tense. And for change of spelling, again, we see decir becomes dir, dir, hacer becomes ar, har, and we would add the endings to that. So diría, dirías, and so forth. Very similar again to what we saw in the future tense. So again, the conditional tense is used to talk about things that would happen, hypothetical things that would happen. We have the same 2 steps that we saw in the future tense. Select a verb and add the correct ending. We do not cut off the ending. We have one set of endings which is identical to the imperfect ER and IR endings. And our irregular verbs in the conditional tense can be organized into these 3 categories. Drop the E, vowel to D, and change the spelling, just like the 3 categories in the future tense.